quick review, and again, you guys have some of your previous lectures. You're going to have to dial back into your little Rolodex, your digital Rolodex. Dr. Perry gave you guys a useful PowerPoint your first year. Second year gave you kind of like a review PowerPoint, talked about some of the abdominal structures. And then now third year, you guys are going to get it for the third time, right? So now we're going to spend a little bit more time to understand that in the moment, especially first and second year, that's where we're living. So we're going to learn it for that moment, and then it's going to get dialed back, especially when you guys get all this other taxing information. Okay? So you guys kind of remember this. This is the same slide, same information, except I kind of took out some of the respiratory or the pulmonary structures. So I focused mostly on the cardiovascular and discussing the organs in which we can see. I left the bronchi on there only because they're important for when we're looking at the artery, bronchus, vein, and noting in which order we should see them stacked upon one another. Do you guys remember the order on BD? What's going to be lateral? Say it out loud. Artery, bronchus, vein. So from lateral to medial, it's going to be ABV. On laterals, yeah, I said lateral to medial, but on the lateral view, what order are they going to go from dorsal to ventral? Say it out loud. This is a safe place for you guys. Say it out loud. Say it loud and proud. Your classmates should not be judging you unless they're speaking too. Because if they're not speaking, then 9 times out of 10, they're waiting for you to say something and then agree with you and see if it's right. All right? So yes, you guys were correct back there. It goes artery, bronchus, vein from dorsal to ventral. All right, so there goes my little labeling that I did. And so these are some of those important structures in which we're looking at. Can everybody make out this star? No, it's kind of small. But that star is right over the cardiophrenic ligament. Okay? Remember we talk about landmarks when we're dealing with radiographs. You want to look for some of your known landmarks, the things that aren't going to necessarily be moved or displaced by anything abnormal per se. Okay? Or if we know they normally sit in a particular area, that when anything is displaced, we can kind of correlate it to what's being abnormal in that area. So some of our stationary things like the vertebra, the ribs, the intercostal spaces, the sternobra, even the diaphragm, okay? We always look at those in correlation. It's something to compare to. We know that the heart typically sits center, okay? But if we see that heart is now more dorsal, why? Okay, so you guys talked about some things with Dr. Vasudeva, like fluid, pushing the cardiac a little bit up, pneumothorax, all right? So we look at these fixed landmarks, and so we use those to kind of help us identify locations based off of what we know, right? So as you guys all know, in the early days of medicine, it started because humans got curious. How do these work? We started cutting things open, and we started seeing where these structures are, starting to find out that we all look the same when it comes down to bones and organs and such, right? Take back the skin and everybody looks the same way. Just a different bone structure down here. Yes, ma'am. The star on this BD is for the cardiophrenic ligament. Okay? So cardiophrenic, meaning it's going from the cardiac silhouette to the diaphragm. A lot of things we recognize is going from one organ to the other, so we get those things named that way. Okay? So why am I talking so much about landmarks? Because we're going to use a lot of those landmarks when we start talking about the heart being abnormal. Can you guys all hear me well over here? Okay. Do I need to be by the microphone? All right. So we're going to start using those when we notice that this heart that pretty much looks like us making a fist, right? It doesn't look like the pretty fantasized, romanticized heart that we get on our Valentine cards, but it looks like your fist. It's being held in this dog's chest or this cat's chest or even in your chest. Okay? And so we want to recognize where it typically sits, because when we start seeing changes in this normal, changes in what we believe are the repeated normals that we've seen, that's been represented through the literature, that's when we start developing what's abnormal and where our diseases go from there. Okay? All right, so let's start moving. All right, so let's talk about, that is loud, Jesus, the aged cat. Okay? This is going to be my first intro slide because this is a normal variation of the older cat. However, there is sometimes, some literature will cite that it is associated with some type of endocrine dysfunction or abnormality. But what you'll see is this very prominent aortic arch in some of our older cats. And you'll see a knob on the VD. All right, so you may see what we call a wavy or undulating, meaning it's just another word for wavy, kind of going around there. And look, I got some animations. Where'd it go? Oh, there it goes. Oh, this sucks. It was so like smooth and pretty. So I learned how to do this one time, and it took me forever to figure it out, but I figured it out. So this is what is zooming in on this area of the aortic arch. You guys see it kind of coming out, and it looks almost as if you have one of those little light bulbs with a hook. Maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna point it out. Because I'm look, you gotta put your imagination. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 o'clock, y'all gotta change your brain to an imaginoscope. And y'all gotta pretend to see these shapes in the clouds with me, okay? All right, so we saw the heart here, and if you follow this out, you're on that aortic arch, and then you're going into the descending aorta. Everybody appreciate that bulge right here? Okay? And then this one works. That sucks. Then you see this little knob. Where's my arrow? There she goes. There's my arrow here. So it's kind of like this little bunching at that area of the aortic arch. All right, so it just becomes, for the lack of a better way of saying it, flaccid. And so it doesn't really hold its good position like it's been holding for all the years prior. All right, so that may be something that you see and you want to make sure that it's not abnormal. It just may be an incidental finding in the age change. Okay, so the aged cat. Okay, so when we talk about normals, quote unquote, we're talking about things that we've seen repeatedly demonstrated in animals that we repeatedly have seen not be diseased. Okay, so when you talk about what the majority is, this is what's been represented as being normal parameters. All right, and so we use a couple of different things. We never use just one of these. All right, and sometimes it may be misunderstood that we use one of these, but what we're doing is we're going through a mental checklist. So what you guys will find by the end of this semester, when we give you cardiac cases, you will have quickly made a quick assessment based off of a couple of these that you can quickly visualize and say, okay, do I need to jump to further parameters to further support my findings, okay? And that's taking into consideration what your patient's presenting complaint is and what his history is and what his physical exam findings are, all right? Because you had to get through those in order to say, I want to do chest radiographs to even start, right? So once you got these chest radiographs, because the dog came in coughing, you have abnormal peripheral pulse rhythms, and you want to see what's going on with the cardiovascular system, okay? So a couple of the parameters that we're going to use to assess the size of the heart and to further localize are going to be a part of this list. Now, some are used more than others. Some are more reliable than others. And then others are just kind of like, if you're kind of on the edge and you just want to make sure, kind of look at them and then you go further, confirm. So things that we look for size. So a lot of times we're looking like, that kind of heart looks big. All right, well, let's go through the checklist. What's this intercostal space? Why am I starting with that one? Well, it's an easy one to start off with, right? Whereas vertebral heart stroke, we gotta go measure and calculate and do all of these calibrations and all of that. All right, so that starts off with the size to find out if it's big or not. Then we're gonna localize, and what I mean by localize, and y'all stop me if you have any questions, because we're gonna play around with this in just a moment. What I mean by localize is we're gonna determine who is causing the abnormality, or what part of the heart or the cardiovascular system is causing it. And all of these abnormals are gonna clue you in. So when we talk about left-sided heart changes, we're gonna look for things that are abnormal or causes abnormals and appearances on the left side. And so there's some clues, keys or characteristic signs that we'll see, okay? When we talk about right-sided heart changes, there are going to be certain abnormalities that we see based off of these parameters here that will help us kind of focus in on our differential list, all right? So let's talk about these in detail. So cardiac size, that's going to be the first thing for us to determine, do we have cardiac disease going on, okay? So the heart can be either what? Small, big, or just right. We got a Goldilocks here, okay? We're either going to be too small, too big, or just right. Okay? So if we're taking these films because we feel there's something going on with the cardiac, or the heart size, we want to see what we're dealing with. Are we going to be the small Goldilocks or the big Goldilocks? Okay? Or are we looking at something that hasn't quite changed those sizes? All right. So on a plain radiograph, we're just really looking at that silhouette, right? So we're looking at this outline. We're looking at a soft tissue opacity. That's also a fluid opacity, because remember, soft tissue and fluid are going to be the same density, same opacity, so they're going to look the same. All right? So when we're looking at this, we want to quickly assess whether or not this is something that we need to spend more time looking into. Okay? So we have a couple of normals, and there's some breed variations, so like deep-chested dogs, okay? And our standard size dogs, so like your labs, your beagles, we're gonna like to keep them about 2.5 intercostal spaces, okay, on rough note. Remember, this is years of looking at normal babies or normal dogs that are non-diseased and how the heart typically sits. And this is what they've seen as a pattern. So remember, all of this is just a pattern that they've seen over the years to give us these normal parameters. All right. Then you have your shallow or wide-chested dogs, your brachiocephalic. They're on the upper end, right? Because those brachiocephalic dogs, they seem like they have this squat chest. So it's going to make it look like they got a big heart, but it's really because their chest is so squat. All right. And a lot of times they have changes in their vertebral bodies that change the way the ribs look. So it makes it look like it's going across more spaces. But we don't want it to go past that 3 to 3.5 mark. Otherwise, we're going to deem it large. If it goes under, we're going to deem it small. Okay? So these are numbers for you guys to remember. 2.5 and 3 to 3.5 and the dog. Cats. On the safe side, we're going to keep it at 2. Okay? That's what's written on my slide. Now, if you guys come to me with a more valid and a more represented way, and you guys say, Dr. Carter, I read this in the journal that was published in 2000, for the last 10 years, and this is what they're saying, then I can check it. I'm fine with that. Okay? I'm fine with that. But we're going to have, as of right now, this is what the books are saying, the texts are saying is 2. Okay? Not too bad. Almost like opto. Kind of keep it around some same numbers. Y'all will get there next semester. That means like everything is 15 plus or minus. Like, why? Alright. So, when we're counting the intercostal spaces, we're going to pick a set of ribs. Okay? I got an animation for this, if it works. All right? And you're gonna start from the cranial border and start measuring those intercostal spaces. I sometimes, because it does get a little funky when you're looking at these ribs on which ones you're gonna count, okay? So I'll sometimes start from the costochondral junctions, especially if they're mineralized, and use those as my spaces and kind of go up and follow those, all right? Otherwise, you wanna make sure if you're starting with this one, that you're not going to this space, you're going to the one following. Make sense? And you guys will have time to practice this. This is probably going to be the best one for you to master because this is going to be the easiest one for you to look at and be able to multitask looking at while you're talking to your technicians and trying to figure out what else you're going to do. Yes, ma'am?
Is it much easier to just understand for you?
No. Okay. Reason being is because not all the time are you going to be right there on the center ready to touch them or to be able to correlate. And we want to kind of count it really at that mid-range. Okay? I just start from the costochondral junctions and then move up. That way I'm making sure I'm matching up my ribs appropriately. Okay, that's what I'm saying when I start there. All right? So I got another animation, and another animation, and another one. So this guy would be approximately 3.5 to 4. If I said this was a standard sized dog, this would be considered enlarged, right? And I have a couple of other things to go on, but we'll look at that later. All right, so everybody kind of get that? You guys see where my arrows are going? Yeah?
Yes.
Is this red doing too much? I was trying to be in the spirit of cardio. Okay. All right. Vertebral heart score. This one.
Okay, dumb question.
Huh?
It's a dumb question.
What's up? No question is done.
On the last slide, it was a space of, the score was 4, so that means the heart was large.
Yes.
So we already established that.
So remember I said if it was a, say I said it was like a standard dog, like a beagle,
Yeah.
4 is going to make it an enlarged heart. Okay? And so you see how quickly counting the intercostal spaces lets you go on to say, okay, now I can go ahead and spend some more of my valuable time, because right, we're trying to hurry up and find out what's wrong so that we can get the best treatment started as quickly as possible. So if I see that I have an increased number of intercostal spaces, and I see a couple of these other things that we're going to start talking about, then I'm going to spend time on something like this, a vertebral heart score. All right, this involves a little bit more of your time and your patience, okay? And it consists of a couple of steps. When you're looking at this lateral view, this is when we use it, you want to, this is why knowing your anatomy is important. You want to be able to identify where the carina is, where the caudal vena cava is, where the apex is, and where the cranial margin of the heart is, okay? 4. You're going to have a couple of parts to this. You're going to have a long axis and a short axis. All right, so I'm just giving you a couple of these things, these ideas out here. And then you want to be able to identify where T4 vertebra is. Okay? Those are very key to how we're going to do this. So following this in steps, we're going to start with the long axis, which is measured from the carina. Okay? So you're going to start just ventral to the carina and measure down to the apex of the heart. Okay, see my line there? Then you're going to take that axis, and I got to see how I had this ordered. Find T4 and count the vertebral bodies from T4 caudally. Okay? So with this one, starting at the cranial margins of T4, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5.5. Okay? that's gonna be my long axis. You'll record that to the side. Then you're gonna measure your short axis, which is gonna be perpendicular. So you're gonna make a cross, starting at the level of the caudal vena cava. Okay, everybody see where that is? Now this was, if we were on a better computer or updated computer, it was nice and smooth and it looks like I drew it. So you guys could have followed it a little bit better. But this thing is not liking me right now. We're just gonna be appreciative of what we have. So I started from the caudal margins at the level of the caudal vena cava, and I went across to the cranial margins of that cardiac silhouette. All right. So some of your digital viewers will have some calipers on there for you. Okay, well I don't really have the numbers to say, okay, if it measures centimeters or millimeters for you, what it would be. I just know the old school way where we take a piece of paper up and we put this up and make a hash mark, count down, and go forth. So I'm gonna take this short axis, I'm gonna start at T4, and it's gonna extend caudally, and I'm gonna count those vertebral bodies. So I told you it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5.5 for the long axis, and now 6 for the short. Add those two numbers together. You'll get about 11.5, right? Now, this is your normal range and what you guys are gonna look at. Dogs should be anywhere from 8.7 to 10.7. Anything smaller than that is microcardia. Anything larger than that is cardiomegaly. Cats, you'll do the same thing in the way you measure the long axis and the short axis, except you have a slight